Thank you to being divine, the divine being, the source of creation, for being this live webinar, and all the forms of consciousness which heal, and all the forms of consciousness which expand, the expansion of knowledge and wisdom. Thank you to the structures of consciousness responsible for the expansion of consciousness, for the expansion of knowledge, the great eternal tradition of wisdom. Thank you to everyone's ancestors for their role, the ancestors' role in the manifestation of the physiology. Because without our bodies, we just wouldn't be here doing this. So thank you for that. Thank you to the divine in all of us, to our whole healing circle, for being present and for the ability to work powerfully and concisely and to empower everyone in this circle, in the healing group, to own the entire body of energy healing skills and technologies and knowledge, so that we may all become self-sufficient. It would be very beautiful for all of us to be able to support the expansion of this particular angle of understanding and knowledge for everyone on Earth, so that no one ever falls sick, so that everyone heals themselves straight off the bat, and we can all become self-sufficient and not have to depend on others for the sake of our well-being, for our health, for the sake of the fulfillment of our desires. All right, thanks everyone for being with me. I really appreciate it. Okay, so what is energy healing? So simply put, energy healing is the process of using consciousness or attention to heal the body. If we analyze what happens through traditional medicine, where we take a medication or we go through a procedure, or sometimes we take certain herbs, or we modify diet. Well, there are a lot of things there's actually 3 pillars to health. There's rest, activity, and diet, those 3. So on some level or another, modifying rest, exercise, and diet, that's another way to look at that. By working with these 3 areas, that we can promote health, and that's great and it's wonderful. But we all know that even though we know what we're supposed to do, like how many hours of sleep we should get at night, or what kind of dietary choices or quantities we should be choosing, that kind of thing, how much exercise we should get, that it's not always easy to do that. And the reason is that sometimes the seed of an imbalance, or the seed of a behavior that's not supportive of health, sits at a deeper level than the surface. So if we try to bend, we try to force, the correct, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to exercise 2 hours a day, for sure, I'm going to do it. And then you go out and on the second day, you roll an ankle, right? And then no more exercising 2 hours a day for 8 weeks or something, till the ankle heals, that kind of thing. So creating a foundation of health through attention first. Attention or awareness or consciousness. We structure the health on the level of consciousness. So it's like planting a seed. The tree is, I'm going to exercise 2 hours a day. But first we plant the seed in fertile ground, and we go in and we make sure does it have enough rain? Does it have enough sunshine? Does it have enough fertilizer? Does it have everything it needs? Then I can actually build a stable structure on top of that, something that's sustainable, something that I can carry for a long time, consistently, and expand upon. The other thing is, if we look at the way medicines work or herbs work, the medicine has a sort of intelligence in it. And that intelligence speaks to the physiology. Some area of the physiology is not functioning up to its full potential. So you can say that the energy frequency, the life force in the body there is not vibrating at its fullest potential. And then, so the medicine comes in and the medicine's vibrating at the level of intelligence where the body should be. And it speaks to the body that's like over here going, oh man, this is like a drudgery. And the body goes, oh, that's my vibration that I should be at. And then we eliminate the medicine, and the body is able to maintain that level of functioning. So like a tuning fork, the herbs and the medicines work. Well, it's actually possible for consciousness to do that too. Just consciousness alone. I mean, what is it in the herb that makes it vibrate at a really healthy level? Well, it's the consciousness of the plant. And so our consciousness is this lovely, malleable material. It's pure awareness, pure perception, pure understanding, pure knowingness, pure being, pure essence of life itself. And that material that we all own is malleable. And so energy healing is about working directly with consciousness to produce the energy frequencies, to produce the effect that will balance and heal the body, and then applying it directly to the physiology at the level where the seed of imbalance lies. So we go into the root, right? The cause of the imbalance. And so often the cause is under the symptoms at the surface, the cause is inside. Okay, so that's energy healing. And I'm using different means of navigating the field of consciousness or awareness to support this process. And we'll go into that as we're going along here. I thought it would be nice, though, to go ahead and start with each question. And as we do this, I was thinking, I mean, it's my intention for tonight, and we'll see how this goes, but to answer a question and then to do some healing in our collective for each question. So here's a question from Fairfield. And this question is, daily self-healing. Any basics or additional healing to include when time allows? So usually awareness is oriented outwards toward the relative. And there's something deeply satisfying and deeply nourishing about bringing awareness in to the manifest and subtle levels of being. So just the choice or decision to spend a few minutes in a day to heal oneself, that alone has a very uplifting effect. You know, if I decide to take a few minutes for myself each day, there's a part of me that really appreciates it. So what I found is my favorite time, and I've said this before, is right before sleep, because the most powerful focusing of attention on the healing process is done when awareness is the most subtle. And the awareness is the most subtle when it's in that gap between the states of consciousness, waking, dreaming, and sleeping. So when we're lying in bed, falling asleep, and it's dark, and so the senses of perception start to close down, then that's a beautiful time for consciousness or awareness to expand and to draw upon its higher potential to promote healing. And also, we all know that the sleep process is a very healing process. So if we use the time just before sleep to go into some healing time for the self, what happens is we experience doing some self-healing in that waking state of consciousness drifting off to sleep. And very often, as needed, the energy healing will continue into dream state and then continue into sleep state. And when that happens, it creates a very powerful effect. It allows one to experience the healing effects or one's own healing capabilities from three different angles, 3 points of perception, we could say, from waking, dreaming, and sleeping. And that's providing a very holistic or broad perspective on the healing process. So that first point is when to do self-healing. Falling asleep time is a great time. If you can afford it, waking up in the morning is also a great time, because you have the same type of dynamics going on of transitioning between waking, dreaming, and sleeping. The other thing is, what can we do at that time? What would be like the most useful way to focus attention? The answer is, and I do this is what I do, is that knowing that our bodies are incredibly intelligent. Our bodies are really big filtration systems, and the body receives all sorts of information from the universe continuously. And what the body does, the nervous system, all the different systems of the body are designed to sort of filter out whatever of that universal information isn't relevant at the moment, and just bring to awareness what is relevant. So it's the nature of the physiology to let you know what you need. One good way to get started as you're falling asleep is to do a little scan of the physiology with awareness. And sometimes people like to start at the head and then scan down through the body. I find that I often start in the middle, because the heart is where one's deepest truth is ever revealed. There are no secrets. When awareness goes to the heart, we really know what's really going on with us. So that's a great place to start too, is to just start in the heart area and just say, what am I feeling now? And what do I need? And one of the first things that I noticed when I started doing body scans, and I used to do this back in the day when my children were very young, and when they were really tiny, they seemed to sleep better when they were sleeping very close, but that wasn't necessarily conducive to my best rest. So I often, right, I ended up experiencing hours at night of not sleeping. And so what I found was that awareness at that time, if I was looking through the body and seeing what was happening, one of the first things I noticed was that there are channels of energy that run through the physiology. These are the channels through which awareness or attention moves through the body. So meridians is one description of those, and nadis is another, because meridians run in the astral plane. So they're not, meridians have a kind of a span from etheric level of the physiology down through the astral level of the physiology, and they're running through the body there. But nadis tend to, we can think of meridians as running through space, through the space of the body, and we can think of nadis as running more through the density of the body. That nadis run from the surface down to the subtle levels of the physiology. So the nadis let the awareness fathom to deeper, finer, more abstract levels of the physiology, whereas meridians tend to stay at more the middle energy range of the physiology. But meridians also interface nicely with the energy field around the body, which is another area that's interesting to scan. And one of the nice things about using that time just to scan, like that's just one thing you can do, is scan around and just see what's going on. Just like when we were teenagers and the first time we kind of looked in the mirror and went, oh, is that what I look like? You know, it's okay. It is always nourishing. It's always life supporting to put attention. So first is just to get used to the energy flow in the body. And I think what I'd like to do right now is look through the collective and do a little healing for this. And here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the nadis and meridians in everyone's physiologies. And I'm seeing where those energy channels interface with the larger energy field of self. The astral and causal levels of the physiology are essentially collective levels of the physiology. So there's this point where the inner channels of flow interface with the external channels of flow. And that, I'm looking at the junctions. It's like they're points of significance where the energy channels that run within the body talk to or communicate with the energy channels that run out of the body. And right there, I'm feeling a kind of softening in that spot. This is also very helpful for anyone with respiratory concerns, which I think is actually a question in my pile, but that's for tomorrow. But the respiratory system is a way that we understand. It's a physiological way of understanding. Breathing is a way of understanding the relationship between our individuality and our universality. And I just did a blog on that in the newsletter for anybody who wants to check out that information in more detail. So it's like those points in the body where the inner channels of energy meet. There are a lot of them that come out the crown of the head. There are a lot of them that come out through the base of the spine. And then each chakra also has a point of contact. The heart. Each chakra in the front and the back of the body in each chakra point. And so there, as awareness goes onto those spots, what I'm seeing happening is an integration of a level of sweetness and support from the source of creation going onto these spots in the physiology. Out the palms of the hands and the points, the tips of the fingers, even the tip of the tongue, there's a channel right there. The ears, each of the senses of perception have a point of connection. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So for people with challenges in their senses of perception, also, this is clearing up and softening up. There's a quality of a very tender, it really, to me, looks like a tender love. That seems to be the energy signature. There's even a question about energy signatures in here today. But that seems to be the quality or the feature of consciousness, which is sitting at these spots where the individuality faces off with the environment. There's a lot happening at this spot right here. And it's opening a channel of understanding. And that's very interesting to me that this area is getting especially activated because in the body, the fifth chakra is that point. The energy nature of the fifth chakra is to interface with our world, right? Our hands, they come right out here, right off of our arms, and our hands interface with the world, and our vocal mechanism interfaces with the world. So there also is like a really major spot of connection. And another quality that I'm seeing there is pure truth, pure knowingness. And as the pure knowingness is like establishing, it even looks like it's establishing in a matrix form. Matrices are structures at the astral level of the physiology. Remember, I mentioned that the meridians definitely sit at an astral level, that where the threads of consciousness form together in nice, stable, orderly patterns, like sacred geometrical patterns that promote a condition in the physiology that allows for divine being to sit in that spot. And luckily online you can see a lot of great, very beautiful examples. You can Google image sacred geometry and see all kinds of lovely shapes and forms. Mandalas, different kinds of mandalas. that is a truth matrix. That is a truth matrix. And that truth matrix is, it is connected to meridians that run up to the prefrontal cortex. So I'm seeing this is becoming very active, and now it's coming up into the prefrontal cortex area. And there is some stabilization of discernment, increased discernment. And that quality of discernment is so necessary and so beautiful for all of us to be able to heal ourselves, in like to be able to stabilize the full potential, our full potential to heal. Because the discernment allows the scanning process to make sense. So we scan, awareness can move through the body, and you start to gain facility at, I want to move my awareness into my liver. I remember years and years ago, around the time that my children were very little, I was talking to my father, who is a very dear man, and we were talking about experiences with health and eating. And I remember him saying at the time that, well, all his life, he was aware of food when it was in his mouth, but once he swallowed it, no awareness. I said, you don't feel anything, any kind of experiences in the torso, experiences of pressures or different hot, heat or cold or anything? No, didn't experience anything. And that was at that time I realized that sometimes people don't. We've created some filters. There's some filters or blockages in the ability to really go in and clearly determine what's going on in the body. So the first thing is just getting that facility to move the awareness around and to discern what we are feeling. Because particularly in very important areas for using energy healing to promote expansion of consciousness, it requires sometimes going in like a scientist or a surgeon or something, and going into very delicate areas of the brain, or very fine, there are these very, very fine layers of structure, like inside the kidneys and, different parts of the body. And so it's useful to become skillful at focusing attention kind of like a laser, and being able to get in and really feel very specific parts of the physiology. We're going to do some healing and talking about that in a little bit when we get to the question on the pineal gland. Oh, but that's also a European question. That question came in twice, from a Canadian and also from a European. So maybe I'll actually save the pineal gland for tomorrow, if that's okay, because we want to be able to support people when they're online. All right. Anyway, so the discernment interfaces with the ability to move attention around inside the body. And sometimes you can use your hand chakras to help. If you want to feel inside some area, you can get the hand chakra up there going, feeling what's going on in the body, and that it definitely helps to focus attention. And also the tips of the fingers can help too. At one point I was doing a healing on my knee, and I found that it really helped to get my fingertips in there, not touching the flesh directly, but just letting the awareness move through the tips, because they're teeny little chakras in the tips of our fingers, and move through and touch the tissues inside the body and use it like an X-ray. Discernment in the prefrontal cortex. It's helping. Also, right now I'm seeing, as the discernment's in the prefrontal cortex, it's starting to bounce. There's a little wave, and it's starting to bounce back and forth between the front and the back and the front and the back. And it's like it's moving kind of slowly, because when it gets into the center area, it goes into the gap of silence, and then back to the occipital cortex, and then into the gap of silence, and then into the prefrontal cortex, and then into the gap of silence, occipital, silence, prefrontal. And that is massaging. The entire brain is getting a massage of discernment. Beautiful. I love that. I love that it bounces through the source of creation, the field of infinite silence at the source of creation, and that that's sitting right in the center of the brain. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's like I've never seen that before, and I love it. You guys are amazing. And it's very interesting because when the energies like this start to move through the brain, they activate the dopaminergic pathways in the brain. And so that success of moving the awareness back and forth through that, it starts to create bliss. It gives rise to waves of joy, which then communicate back to the heart area, because the heart is the central, like, organizing center for the physiology, and then the heart can distribute the bliss through the whole body. Also endocrine system. Also seeing an awakening and enlivenment of the Davic intelligence in the physiology. This quality of bliss, because it goes from a dense material level down to the silent source of creation, and then up to the dense level at the occipital cortex, and back to the silence again, and up and down like that. Because it's doing that, it's touching all the levels of the body's intelligence. So those structures of the physiology responsible for maintaining the health of the body, those structures which are non-physical and filled with intelligence, with great, very ancient intelligence, the nature of physiologies, are also experiencing that bliss. Also, when the bliss penetrates the physiology, this isn't a thing, you could do this at night when you're falling asleep, right? It's like back and forth, back and forth. The awareness moves back and forth from the front to the back of the brain. When the bliss starts to penetrate through the whole physiology, also the microbiome is affected. The microbiome, being your collective, responds to the bliss by supporting highest health of the digestive process. And when the digestive process works really, really well, then all the nutrients that the body needs to rebuild and to purify, all those nutrients start to flow in a more effortless manner through the physiology. So and the whole thing, it just kind of cycles out, it cycles out to infinity. It keeps rolling and rolling. We could say that it's also extending or expanding. I can feel it rolling because it goes through the silence, the source of silence. Every time it does that, source of silence represents infinity. So the process touches infinity, then it comes back to the point of the physical form, and then it goes back to infinity like that. It has an effect that influences or creates a kind of a pattern of waves in the web of life. It's beautiful. We could keep rolling with this and rolling with this for our whole hour, but I promised everybody I would answer questions, and I've got so many. And there's a couple more that have just come in on the question and answers, so I want to get to everyone's questions. So we'll just leave that healing at that spot right now and let everyone kind of integrate it and enjoy it, play with it as you're falling asleep at night. It's something that was born out of the collective of our healing circle for all of us as a way of starting the process in a simple manner and allowing it to grow and evolve in a natural, spontaneous way to support every level of the body systems, every area of health. Thank you for that awesome question. Okay, this is sweet. He says, hi, Dorothy, I don't have a question for you, but he was rereading something that I wrote several years ago, and he wanted me just to share it. because he thought everybody might enjoy it and benefit from it. Because I do these remote healings every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Now, I used to do them 5 days a week. Now I do them 3 days a week. And yeah, I've written stuff, I've done a lot of writing. The remote healings are followed by written reports. So this says, individual achievement is not measured one way or another. Rather, all achievement is understood in terms of divinity expressing itself in the field of the relative. This way, one doesn't really take credit for achievements, but enjoys the moment-by-moment experience of being the vehicle for that expression. It is a big leap for some people, but essential for all of us in order to rise to our full potential. So that quote references another principle of energy healing, which is essentially the purpose of human nature is to be the vehicle for the divine, for the source of creation, for the being of all, to experience expansion of consciousness. And I think I've probably mentioned that a few times before in previous webinars, that being is completely full, and it's everything, and it's everywhere, and it owns everything, and it's everything that's ever been. It is everything. So what being doesn't experience is surprises and learning new things, and that sort of level of life. And so being makes human, and humans have nervous systems that experience life in a sequential unfoldment, one moment at a time. And so because of that, we experience new things. First we experience we're little, and then we experience we get bigger, and like that, and we grow. So, and it's important, I think, that particular message in a kind of overarching picture for energy healing is really, really valuable to offer to the ancestors, because our ancestors particularly weren't necessarily aware of their cosmic dharma. I think of that as cosmic dharma. And last webinar was on the topic of dharma. And a brilliant point was brought up from Utah, that participant in Utah, that dharma has these 3 levels. There's a cosmic dharma, a vocational dharma, and a personal or individual dharma. And the cosmic dharma of human beings is to be a vehicle for the expansion of consciousness. So we can start there, and nested within that, all the other forms of dharma find their place. And dharma is the energy, or it is the structure, which, oh yeah, also from Ogden, he's saying you may also cover Rishi, Devata, and Chandas. And it's true, because there's a 3-in-1 structure there, right? You've got universal, vocational, and personal. And the personal is it's like that's our manifest level, right? But the universal level is like the Rishi level, or the great overarching seer. Rishi means seer, the knower. Devata is the process of knowing, and vocational dharma is about our individual relationship with our collective. So the Devata is like how the knowing happens. It's the process of knowing. It's knowingness, becoming knowing itself. It's the knowing process. And so that's that process by which we interface with our world, how we serve humanity. It's what we're known for. And then individual dharma, chandas. Chandas is the rhythm, or the manifest pulse of manifest creation. And that's where our individual dharma comes forward. Thank you. Okay, so here's a question from California. I'm sure this varies by person and predicament. But in general, and this question has 3 parts. So the first part, what is a productive cadence to healing? For instance, if you wake up with a sore back, you do a self-healing. If you're still sore, do you try several in one day, one a day for several days, or a few per day until you are better. So first of all, yes, this does vary from person to person. And what I found in all these years of doing this energy healing work is that some imbalances have accrued over the course of time slowly. So sometimes what we get is symptom on the surface, but it's the byproduct. And back pain actually is a kind of good example of that, because our backs are where we hide information from ourselves because we can't see back there. So sometimes if there's a habit of a particular type of, say, emotional discord that we don't want to deal with, a good example is when a person's emotionally strong and they're dealing with, say, situations at work or situations in their relationships with others where other people maybe aren't as strong. So the strong person says, well, you know, this other person, they can't handle that. So I'll handle it, water off a duck's back, you know, I'll just bear with it. And, you know, I'll accommodate them. I'll enable them to do their thing because I'm stronger and I can handle it. And so over time, those type of situations build up pressure. And after some time, the body starts to say, it starts to talk to you and it says, you know, you give and you give and you give. And other people seem to be taking and taking and taking. And where is time for oneself? And where is that process of honoring oneself? So sometimes things, they build up like that over the course of time. It becomes a habit. And we get into a habit. If we're in the habit of always dealing with someone, always giving into them, always letting them have their way, always letting them be a little exploitative or a little, you know, difficult, then over time, there's a part of the physiology that says enough is enough. And then we have to look at that and realize that even though it's kind of like a mother's reaction to kind of take care of everyone in the environment, sometimes that disallows them from being strong too. So even though it may seem a little rude, perhaps, or somehow insensitive, it doesn't always hurt to say no. So that's just an example for the back, but that's an energy that I've seen in the back, a kind of a pattern that I've seen on multiple occasions where someone feels like they're trapped in a situation, like say at work, you know, where they're just expected the uppity ups or expecting something, which is a little bit more than is actually appropriate. And so they're just going along doing it. So yeah, it builds up over time. So then what happens? Well, I wake up in the morning and the symptom is finally busted up to the surface and I'm actually feeling it in my back. So I think, well, this came on pretty quickly. It should go pretty quickly. But we put attention there, maybe it doesn't go right away quickly. So number one, energy healing can be like peeling off the layers of an onion skin. Peeling off the skins off of an onion. We peel off a layer and then underneath that we find, oh, there's another layer. We peel off under that and we find, oh, there's yet another layer. And very, very often the layers line up sequentially with subtler and subtler levels of the physiology. And what I found in the energy healing work is that very often when I get down to the seed, the nut of it, it's almost very, very often sitting in the causal level of the physiology as karma. I can't even remember the number of times I've counted that we peel down and we peel down and we end up with karma at the source. And so that's why the last webinar was about karma and dharma and how karma creates these little boundaries or barriers in the causal field of self. And that what happens is we have, with the ability to work down and to actually feel what is that uncomfortable feeling, like, I feel like I'm being exploited. That feeling, hey, I'm being exploited here. That's the karma. There's some karma of exploitation right there. We go into that karma and we just say, okay, so what's my dharma? What is the dharma that needs to be here instead? And that dharma stands on the four legs of truth, austerity, compassion, and cleanliness or purity. In the case of exploitation, the first step is truth. And the nice thing about the leg of truth is that you can lean on it. No matter how hard you lean on the leg of truth, it benefits. It doesn't bend or break. It stays stable. And even if, say, a boss or somebody you love is annoyed because you are no longer willing to sacrifice yourself so much on their behalf, the outcome is a blessing and a benefit for everyone. The other three legs, in this time, in this Kali Yuga, we have to use discernment. That's why we did that. Now I know. Now I'm understanding why we had to do that healing for discernment first. Because the discernment has to apply to the three legs of cleanliness, compassion, and austerity. Because those three areas, can be, they can have a slightly corrupting effect. Take compassion, for example. Compassion is the area that can actually put a person into a position of self-sacrificing, right? You're so busy taking care of you're so thoughtful of everyone else's feelings and everybody else's needs and all that one ends up going overboard, becoming too austere, not allowing one's own needs to be met, and ends up in a position of being exploited. It always takes more than one person to get into that situation. So these are examples of how discernment is necessary in these three areas. And there's this point from, God bless the wisdom keepers, Satyam Ritam Briyat, truth, the right, the vast. Satyam Ritam Briyat, Brihat. Satyam Ritam Brihat, truth, the right, the vast. So when in doubt, you can stand on the leg of truth, and as the truth pours forward from you to your environment to create balance, it also pours inwardly to support discernment, because what is discernment but a leg of truth, right? The ability to be discerning or discriminating or something. It is an aspect of truth. It is the applied value of truth. So that feeling of discernment, as it's like massaging the front of the brain, is a very, very satisfying feeling. And it creates a lot of bliss. It's called the orbitofrontal cortex, which is kind of right behind the eyes. Okay, so yeah, what you'll find is if you go in and do the energy healing and it doesn't get rid of the problem, then usually it's a matter of peeling off the layers of the onion skin and seeing what's underneath. Whatever has been revealed from the first part of the healing, something else is underneath that. And then what's revealed underneath that, there's something under that. One thing I think everybody will notice, at least it's my experience, I notice this very consistently, if there is physical pain, and I get my hand chakra in there where the physical pain is, it always reduces the pain. It always reduces the pain, at least somewhat. Even if it doesn't get rid of the underlying problem utterly and totally, it's a beautiful place to start getting the right type of energy into that part of the body to promote a healing effect. That's number one. Number two, the next good starting point is to use inference based on the particular area of the body. And I've got a knowledge base on my website, and it's in process, so it's ever growing and expanding. And as everyone knows, anybody who's following knows I've just put something up for the respiratory system, but each part of the body has its cosmic dharma. You could say it's cosmic job. Each part of the body contributes something to the wisdom of individual life. And so I'm sure everyone's heard of Louise Hay. And years ago, she wrote this sweet little book that talked about, it was kind of like the book had like a little list of different parts of the body and what each part of the body represented emotionally. It was a lovely little book, and I've still got a copy of it somewhere, and I really enjoyed it for years. I used that book as my launching point. If some area of the body wasn't feeling well, I'd go look in Louise's book and I'd see, what does Louise Hay say is the role of this part of the body? I remember her saying the circulatory system was the flow of bliss. And I thought, yes, that feels so right. Now, since then, I've been going, expanding and expanding on it. So, there are times when I go and look now and I think, oh, I think I understand it a little more detail than what's in the book, because the book is very simple, but it was a lovely thing. There'd be the part of the body or an illness in particular, and then what it means, and then a little affirmation to go with it. So I recommend that. If anybody's interested, is a great place to start. It's like a launching point. If my lower back hurts, like, well, what's going on right there? And she's got in her little book, each vertebrae has a different meaning. So she's broken it down vertebrae by vertebrae. So you can look in there and see what each one does. And that's a great place to start. You start doing a little healing for that particular area. Like when the neck hurts, it often indicates feeling overwhelmed or overburdened or overwhelmed. And if the neck hurts and you get your hand chakras up there, it starts to feel a little less painful. Then we start to look, well, you ask, well, do I feel overburdened? Like, is there some area of my body, or is there some area of my life where there's too much burden? And almost always, you find there's something. Immediately, the answer comes back, yeah, actually. Okay, so sometimes finding a moment to put the hand chakras, or finding a moment to examine with awareness what's going on, is easy to do several times in the day. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you'll find yourself looking in at nighttime when you're doing the self-healing then. But if you do the healing and it doesn't end, and the symptom is still there, it just means you need to get to a deeper level, because when you get to the seed, when you get to the heart of the onion, and do the healing for whatever's at the very heart, whatever that karma is, then that takes care of it. And I've seen some really beautiful, like, symptoms disappearing then all of a sudden. The symptoms there, and you're working on it, and there, and working on it. Years ago, I had a UTI, and it had been like a month, and I had been trying to heal it. And then I had a buddy who's a great energy healer who came over, and he was helping me. And in one afternoon, he and I dug down. We found that seed of that karma, and we took it out. There were 5 bridges to a past life, and they were dissolved, and they dissolved in a few moments. And like immediately, that was it. The symptoms were done. They were just gone. And I was like, that was it. So it does eventually happen. And so as far as a productive cadence, I would say ultimately for complete total healing, the cadence comes when you get down to the seed. And if you are still having symptoms, it means there's more fun exploration ahead. As a follow-up to number 1, should we, as we're working on self-healing, have expectations about how long a healing will take to complete and how long it will last? I might heal the back and have no pain for 3 months, and then the backache returns, probably for a different reason, and you're probably right about that. If it returns, I would assume it means the healing wasn't truly complete the first time. Maybe we didn't get the seed. So yes, maybe you didn't get the seed, but here's another thing that this question reminded me of, and this is a little new piece of information that sort of cropped up over the last couple of days, and that was that I've noticed that nature has this interesting way of, if you have a desire, you think, I shall forge ahead on this project and do something awesome. So you take on some project, and what nature does is, aha, I see this person is taking on a little project. I'll create some resistance, and then their forging ahead on the project will make them strong. So that happens It happens, it happens, it happens. And it happens very often. I mean, how many times do we think, oh, I'm going to forge ahead on this project, and you go in, you do the thing, it happens faster and easier and cheaper and more efficiently than you thought? Not very often. Usually you think, oh, that's only going to cost $30. And then you get there and it's like, well, actually there was some hidden expenses. It's $45. Oh, that's only going to take an hour. Oh, well, actually the technology didn't quite work and this and that. And then it takes longer. And it happens like that because the nature of the human condition is to expand. We're expanding. So it happens that we take on something, and then whatever it is that we've taken on becomes a vehicle for a deeper level of self-strengthening. So that kind of reminds me of this a little bit, because I have certain things, definitely they're healings that I've gone in, and they happen very quickly and efficiently. With energy healing, particularly because we're working directly with consciousness. But there's some that I've worked on for decades, and I feel like I never get to the bottom. Now, the ones that I'm thinking of are ones where there's no pain, there's no symptom. It's like an extra sweet, special something, you know, to give the world. Like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to, like, you know, cure everyone in the world who has a problem with, you know, Lyme disease or overweight or cancer or something like that. And occasionally healings go out for all those, everyone with that kind of problem. But the other experience is that sometimes the desire to do that healing ends up folding back into the self and then uncovering areas that require more development. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that answers that. One last related question. If my back and my knees hurt and I have a cold sore, is that 3 healings or 1 healing? If it's 3, do I tackle them all the same day or multiple times? First of all, some parts of the body are related to each other, because if we're scanning through the meridians, we're scanning through the body, what you'll find is that all kinds of situations with the legs, knees, ankles, feet are actually related to the back and to the lower back. So it's not uncommon, if the lower back isn't feeling well, to then also feel an echo or reflection of that imbalance in the knees or the ankles or the feet or something, in the hips, in different areas. So part of that is to use your discernment and to determine whether it really is 2 different separate issues, or maybe it's really 1 issue. Maybe the pain in the knee is actually just a byproduct of something going on in the lower back. That could very easily happen. As for the cold sore, that would be a different issue. That's an infection. And okay, so the being is formed like we have our physical body, and then there are finer levels of the physiology like that. So sometimes if there's a stress sitting deep in some subtle level of the system, then that one stress deep down can rise up to the surface and can create problems on several different accounts at the surface. And this is very common when a person suffers from, I have clients who come to me and they say, gee, it seems like as soon as I get over a cold, then I twist my ankle. And as soon as my ankle heals, then I get the flu. And then as soon as I get over the flu, I'm on my monthly cycle. And then as soon as I'm over my monthly cycle, I get an ear infection. And as soon as I'm over, you know, and it's just like they feel like they're just dealing with like a string of different illnesses or problems or seemingly unrelated problems. When that happens and it doesn't give you a break, that means almost always there's anger sitting at a deeper level of the physiology, which is not being addressed. And so it's necessary to get in and look at that anger and understand what the anger is trying to teach you. And as we talked about last time, use the skill of cold anger to apply discernment, so that that anger can be leveraged to restructure life situations which are not serving your evolution, like a surgeon's knife. Anger always hurts, it always cuts, it always destroys, but it doesn't have to destroy needlessly. It doesn't have to destroy indiscriminately. It can come in very carefully with measured regularity, and it can take out precisely the bit which is not needed. So I'd say that would be on a case-by-case basis then. Sometimes 2 or 3 different illnesses could have a single underlying source, and sometimes they could be different from one another. You could have an infection going on and also some weakness in the muscles or bones in the back, something like that. Okay, I have a question. What is an energy signature? And anything else you can tell me about energy signatures, I would like to know. Thank you for this question. So, energy signatures can be identified as flavors of consciousness or feelings. They can be feelings. Energy signatures can be feelings. They can be simple feelings, like the simple feeling of happiness or discernment or truth, or they can be very complex. An energy signature can be an aesthetic sense that evolves from an old memory of a smell in your grandmother's house when you were a kid, or something like that. It can be very kind of complex like that. A trace. Thank you, Ogden. Like a trace of consciousness. The energy signatures. They're really important. I'm really glad we're talking about them right now, because understanding carefully what an energy signature is ties in to better understanding a lot of the forms that are used in energy healing, such as matrices and light medicines. Because very frequently light medicines have energy signatures in it. Remember earlier, we were doing a healing that brought in a kind of a sweet acceptance from the source of creation, from like the mother of the universe, a feeling. We were going through the different points in the body where the meridians or channels within the body interface with the astral body. And I was saying at those points, at those spots, there's a feeling of acceptance and love. And then the quality of discernment came up and flavored, put another flavor in on top of that. And so then we had an energy signature that included both a loving acceptance, and I think there was bliss in there, happiness, and then also discernment. And so those 3 came together to create a more complex energy signature. So sometimes we just get a sense of something. Energy signatures I experience are usually picked up intuitively. For example, there are periods in the history of humanity, places and periods, times and places, that have very specified feelings associated with them based on what the culture was doing at that time. Like when we think of ancient Egypt, there's a feeling. And ancient Egypt was like this huge thing. I mean, this is like 3,500 years, ancient Egypt. Like it's like huge, long period. And within that huge, long period, there were many different epochs and many different experiences that people had. And yet, today, when we come from our perspective of modern times and we look back to ancient Egypt, there's this feel that you get when you think of ancient Egypt or ancient Greece. Or even today, we think of some some part of the world, you know, like how about the Grand Tetons? The Grand Tetons, they have a very well-defined, specific quality to them that's different from anywhere else. Some, you know, we all have different spots around the world that are our favorite, different people in different countries. You have a favorite waterfall, or even a little nook and cranny in your house where you like to curl up and read a book, right? And all of these places have their own little feel to them. So those feels are energy signatures. And I think one more thing can be said about energy signatures is that they tend to arise because they are wholenesses that are able to embrace complementary pairs of opposites. Yeah, complementary pairs of opposites come together to interact with each other in a dynamic way to give rise to some effect on the surface of creation. And so these opposites can come together, and one of the values of the energy signature is it gives you a chance, if you want to go in and look at what is that pair of opposites that's working together to promote that particular signature. And when that complementary pair of opposites is defined or understood, then it's possible to modify the energy signature if that's necessary. And that's very much the dynamic or the process by which I do locational healings, because every location, every place has its little special qualities or energies about it. And if there are like old memories of pain or suffering, trauma in a particular place, what it means is that one of the parts of the complementary pair of opposites is very anchored in karma. There's some karma there. So when Dharma, which is more of a universal form, can come in and embrace both of the parts of the pair. So each part of the pair, both the destructive laws of nature and the constructive laws of nature, are anchored in Dharma. Then you get this nice complete loop of divine intelligence moving through that area, manifesting, folds into infinity, infinitely fast. And when consciousness folds in on itself that fast, it manifests, creates. I know, aha, that's an aha experience. Okay. Program this morning reached new heights. So this is from someone who meditates, and they were saying that they were in meditation and they had this like very high, very new level of experience in meditation. So is it possible that something in the environment needs to be healed so that we can continuously reach deeper levels of experience? This maybe is my question for the webinar, like what might be holding us back from manifesting at a really high level, and how can we overcome that, and is there a healing for that? Thank you for this great question. So first of all, thinking about this question, I noticed that there are energies that can hold a person back from 3 different levels. And it kind of ties back into those layers of Dharma. They're cosmic levels of stress in the environment that are not necessarily produced by us individually. For example, another question coming up a little bit further down the line here, which came up from 2 different people, was a question about the suffering of domesticated animals, particularly animals that are involved or that are engaged in the meat production processes on Earth. And that's, as a vegetarian, I'm a vegetarian. I'm not afraid to say, I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm a vegetarian, I've been for most of my life. You know, I'm not involved in that. And yet, when my awareness or consciousness moves into that area of creation where the animals, not just now, and I think her question said there was something like 7 billion animals or something, 700 billion, what was it? let's see if I can find that one. Yes, 70 billion non-wildlife animals who live in captivity and are used for food purposes. That's like right now. But if we count, when I look into it, I tend to go into my deepest level of being and look into it, and then I see the animals going like back through time. And 70 billion is just a drop in the bucket if we look back through time. And that even includes animals who are pets. Like that was another thing I saw when I looked, is that, you know, today it's illegal for a person to murder a family member, but it's not illegal if you kill your pet. It's not illegal. Anybody can do it. You don't get taken to trial or anything. I mean, not that people do. Most people try to be kind to their pets, but there are people who aren't too. But anyway, for the most part, pets are treated fairly well. People at least try to take care of their pets. But the animals that are involved in the meat industry suffer a lot. So that's one area of our collective that we really haven't helped as much as we need to help. So I think I want to come back and revisit that question, but I wanted to use it right now with this question as an example of a stress that's sitting in the collective level of creation that could be influencing or having an effect on all of us, even if you aren't a meat eater. The fact is, we're living in a world with at least 70 billion beings that are suffering horribly. And that, how can a person be happy when that's happening? You just can't. Yeah, it's a big thing. So we definitely have to do healing for that. Like I said, 2 people asked that question about the animals. Also, there can be ways that we're holding ourselves back on the other 2 levels of Dharma, on the way we've interacted with the environment, present or past, and then the way we interact with ourselves, present or past. So those 3 levels of self-interaction are areas where one could be holding back, or being, I would say, there could be some boundaries to the evolutionary process. On that note, there is also support from all 3 of those areas. And one of the supports that I was aware of, I was noticing, was that it seems, I don't know about the rest of you, but it seems to me that I've been noticing an acceleration of the evolutionary process. And the acceleration seems to be right at the edge of my own capacity to comfortably maintain equilibrium in this flow of change. And this ties in a little bit to that point that I made earlier, which is a lot of times when a person decides to take on a little project or any kind of undertaking, nature will go, oh, you want to do that? Well, here, let me just give you a little resistance so that you can, as you do it, you're like, I'm going to lift this weight. And nature's like, well, let me just make it a little heavier. Oh yeah, our hands raised. Let me just make that a little heavier. So as you lift that, your muscle gets stronger as fast as it possibly can. So that's happening more, because the next time you go to take something on, you're stronger because you did it that way. So then you go back and you go, like, I have certain themes that I tend to revisit in my healing work, and weight loss is one of them. And in the beginnings, I would have these realizations and revelations, and I'd put them into practice, and they would make a difference. And then after a few days, they would quit working. And then I'd be like, oh, so I have to find something deeper, more profound. And so I go look to something deeper, and then, this is making a difference, and it's really working. And then 5 days later, it would quit working. And I mean, this is decades of going. And the latest thing is working, I think. But we haven't been 5 days with it, so I don't know. But lately, the things that I put into practice, they don't just go out in 5 days. They last for 2 weeks or 4 weeks, or who knows. So it's like A progress is being made, but strength is also happening. Ultimately, karma. Ultimately, karma holds a person back from the movement of the expansion of consciousness, because that's really what experiences are. We're having good experiences in meditation, or we're having experiences of awakening or expansion of higher states of consciousness. This is a movement of consciousness without boundaries. And when karma is there, it makes like a solid wall at the causal level of creation that blocks the flow of expansion. And when dharma is there, dharma acts like walls. Dharma has a stabilizing effect, but at the same time, it doesn't block the flow of expansion of consciousness. You can think of dharma like transparent walls in the causal field. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we're already at 9. Oh, we're already almost at the end of our day, and there's other questions I wanted to get to, and there are 2 questions that came in tonight. Anyway, so karma. So the principle with karma, and I suggest everyone to look back at the 2 previous webinars, and if you weren't in on those webinars for any reason, just email me. I'll send you the links. And we put them up for free every 6 months anyway. After 6 months, it goes up for free. But the point here is that when a wall of karma, a wall in the causal field, which is creating a form that allows life to have meaning, that allows life to have an individual life to have a unique shape, when that wall is replaced with dharma, then it continues to support, it continues to allow life to be meaningful, and it continues to allow an individual to know themselves, and yet it doesn't block the flow of consciousness or being. So that, I would say, would be the solution for healing. And we did a lot of healings for karma and dharma in the last webinar, so I think I'm going to glaze over that a little bit. Because we're ending tonight's meeting on that question, we will probably revisit it tomorrow. Let me just check what's come in here. Question about purification, expressing as heat in the body and skin. I really appreciate that question, because particularly at this time when the summer is coming to its end, our bodies definitely have been absorbing heat over this last season, since, like June or something, May. Our bodies have been doing that, and as a result, the heat builds up in the physiology. It can create a corruption in the way we deal with the heat. We get overwhelmed. The tissues themselves get overwhelmed, and it can be the heat can sit in the body as forms of anger, like any kind of emotional structure that's also related to heat, such as anger, frustration, anxiety. And so those at a subtler level, so the heat exists like in a physical form in the body, and then at a subtler level, it exists as these feelings of feeling upset about something. And often when the feeling is there underneath, it gets associated with feeling overwhelmed, or feeling like, well, I'm feeling angry because I'm being exploited, or because I'm overwhelmed, or because, this person is difficult, or that situation is impossible, or whatever. But always at that point, the trick is to turn the awareness in, to use the situation or circumstances as a reason to turn awareness in and find out, no, where is it that the discordant feeling is sitting in the physiology? And this is where it becomes very useful to be quite good at scanning the physiology, because when we can scan in a very concise manner, we often find that the whole being, the whole self, is brilliant, it's enlightened, you're beautiful. You wouldn't be here in this webinar if you weren't already at a very high level of experience and understanding and expansion of consciousness. But the body sometimes will hold something that's not expanded, that's not enlightened, that's not brilliant in some small little area, in a celiac nerve or something. There can be some, and I'm seeing also for somebody in our healing circle, there's a little kind of like infection-y type of something going on in the celiac nerve. And I'm seeing that there's certain types of infections that are not like West Nile virus, for example. West Nile virus, that it seats itself in a spot like that so that it's like hidden. It may be that the effect is systemic and the person feels it all over the body, but that it seats itself. It's like kind of home base in a little spot somewhere in the body. And if the awareness can get into that spot, and that's often when the anger is really a problem, or when the heat in the body is really a problem, it's because there can be an invasive energy in there, like a virus or a bacteria or something which is unhelpful for the body. And that virus or bacteria comes up to be the physical manifestation, the physical representation of the discord. If it builds up to too many layers, and like the imbalance spins in on itself like that to infinite speed, it can actually come up and manifest as some particular physical function in the body. Clearing that, yes.
Where's the celiac?
Oh, it's kind of behind your stomach, and it's sort of in front of the spine and behind the stomach. I'll repeat the question.
Did they hear me say celiac?
Oh, the question was, where's the celiac nerve? Thank you. Also, this lovely lady from Australia just pointed out that the question about the pineal gland, because remember I said that a couple different people asked, there was someone from Europe who asked, but the other person who asked was from Australia. And the Australians are on tonight only. But unfortunately, we're past our time. I'm sorry. But I want you to know that I put a lot of thought into the question about the pineal gland. So I would like to address that one tomorrow. Today we kind of tried to run through a lot of shorter, smaller questions, and tomorrow I'd like to spend a little bit more time on some bigger questions. There's this like awesome question about a lot of details about how energy healing actually works and how I experience, like, how do I do the energy healing? So that's a really awesome question. There, as I said, there were 2 questions about the pineal gland, and there were 2 questions about the animals. And then there's another question here about how do I do energy healing? So there are 2 questions on that one. And there's the pineal gland question. Yeah, and a couple of others. There's another pineal gland question. That's going to be, yeah, that's the Australian question. So we've got quite a few great questions to look at tomorrow. And I want you to know that I love you all very dearly. And it is my intention, if I'm not able to get to every single question during the live webinar, that I would like, this is to my team, I would like to make videos, which each video specifically on any question that I wasn't able to address in the webinar, and then we can post those online so you can have your questions answered. So thank you everyone very much for being with me. I'm very grateful, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to all the questions tonight, but we will do this again tomorrow. Everybody gets all the recordings. We try to get the recordings out to everyone within 24 hours. So it's a huge joy and privilege and pleasure for me. So thank you everyone for being here. Oh, yes, thank you all so much. So we'll keep doing this. And if we end up with tons of questions, then maybe we'll have to do question and answer videos or webinars more often. Thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Those who can be with me in real time, those who can't, and I'm looking forward to answering the other questions. Thank you. Good night.